Welcome back, everybody. So I was reading this article in the Wall Street Journal about Dave Ramsey, and it's not directly related to investing. It's more about personal finance and about how younger people today maybe don't really relate to Dave and his style as much as other people did. But I think there were a few good ideas here that also relate to the challenges we have with investing that I wanted to share. Now, if we just start with the title, it says, Dave Ramsey tells millions what to do with their money. People under 40 say he's wrong. And what I did is I basically went down here in the article and I highlighted specific parts that I thought were interesting or just gave me ideas of some of the issues that we deal with investing. And I think there's some overlap here as to the same type of problems we have whenever we're trying to learn about personal finance or we're trying to learn about stocks. But before we get started with the article, I just want to talk about Dave Ramsey for a little bit because Dave is a person that I actually disagree with him on quite a few things, like his never use a credit card thing. I don't agree with his ideas around investing about you can always get a growth mutual fund that gives you 12% a year. I think those are ideas that aren't explained well enough for the everyday person to really understand what he's trying to communicate. But even though I don't agree with everything that Dave talks about, I recognize that he's helped probably millions of people improve their financial situation. And that's something that I deeply respect. And obviously, I haven't accomplished that. So I think it's easy to criticize when you don't 100% agree with someone. But the reality is that he's done a lot of good. And I respect that. And so if we go down to the first one here, they talk about how rising inflation has led to surging prices for groceries, cars, and many essentials. The cost of a college education has skyrocketed in 2 decades, with the average student debt for federal loans at $37,000. Overall debts for Americans in their 30s jumped 27% since 2019, steeper than any other age group. And home prices have risen considerably while wages haven't kept pace. And so a lot of the idea here is that with inflation and wage gaps and wealth gaps, that's what's caused a lot of the younger folks to go into more debt. And while I do think there's some truth to that, I also think we need to talk about the reality of our mentalities and expectations have also changed over time. And what I mean by that is our expectation of what it means to be doing well, I think, is different today than it was even a decade ago, and especially 2 decades ago, right? Obviously, we have social media now, so everybody, and not just young people, we see other people's lives on social media or what we think are other people's lives. And so our own expectations get skewed, even if what we're seeing is a thing that a person just did just for the internet and it's not real, or we see a glimpse into someone's life who is at stage 10 and we're at stage 3, and we're comparing our stage 3 to their stage 10, right? And it doesn't match up. Even though I do agree that there are, broader economic problems, right? Every generation is going to go through a different part of the economic cycle. And so by definition, it's just going to be different as time goes on. But I do think part of it too is our expectations are skewed in terms of what it means to do well. And we live in a society now where it's like hyper consumerism, hyper consumption. And I think that also leads to people taking on more debt. And how this relates to investing is, again, you see people doing well, and instead of just doing the fundamental things and having patience over time, we make decisions that are based on how do I get from stage 3 to stage 10 tomorrow, as opposed to how do I get from stage 3 to stage 10 in a decade? Because if you have a decade to do it, the path is relatively simple. It doesn't mean that it's easy, but it's not difficult to know what the path is. If you're trying to get from 3 to 10 in a week, then it's a much different path that's much higher risk and less likely to be successful. Okay, and along those lines, if we scroll down here, this comment I really liked because it's not knowing about money feels scary, especially when you're a young adult and you have to pay your bills. You wonder, should I go on a trip or invest in the S&P 500? I'm just looking for the right answers. So this was such a great comment to put in the article because it's the reality, not just for young people, but for all of us when we start learning about money. Like, we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the experience, we don't have the confidence, and we don't want to sound stupid by asking a dumb question. And so it becomes this thing that kind of feeds on itself to where we don't talk about it, but yet it's really impactful in our lives. And when we're struggling with money, it's painful, whether that's actual like physical pain or just emotional pain or anguish of having to deal with the situation. And it's tough. But I think part of the disconnect here is people are looking for answers because they just want someone to tell them what to do because they don't know what to do. But a better approach is not to look for answers. It's to look for ways to learn how to get the answers yourself, right? And it's a slight difference, but it's a difference between, hey, I'm going to tell you what to do, or I'm going to tell you how to figure out what to do for yourself. But the point is, the more that we can help each other learn how to think about a problem, as opposed to just telling you an answer to a problem that only takes in my personal perspective, I think the better we'll all be. And I think that's one of the challenges of getting past the mode of, I want you to tell me an answer, to, I want you to teach me how to do it so I can come up with my own answer. Okay, so if we go to the next one, it says, many young adults scratch their heads over his advice that people should let their credit scores dwindle and die because people need a good credit score. And this is a topic where, again, I disagree with Dave on this. You know, a credit score to me is just a tool. It's just like any other financial tool that we have. A good paying job is a tool. An emergency savings account is a tool. A Roth IRA is a tool, right? All these things are tools in a broader plan or goal to be more financially secure or financially independent or however you want to define that goal. And these are just ways to get there. And so the reason why I think this is an interesting point is because it speaks to this idea that we get caught up in what's right or wrong, or what's the right way or the wrong way. And people argue about this online every day, like 24/7, right? It doesn't matter what the topic is. We'll limit ourselves because we're trying to fit ourselves in a box of like, oh, well, I don't believe in debt, so I'm not going to do credit scores. I think credit scores are immoral, so I'm just going to ignore it, right? And if you feel that passionately about it and you're willing to limit yourself because of that belief, then that's cool. That's a personal decision. But I've always felt that when it comes to money, you shouldn't limit yourself in terms of how you can be successful or how you can be secure. And that comes from probably, having a background to where, I was unemployed with no money and I was very insecure from a financial perspective. And I never want to go back to that, right? Because ultimately, you never really know what's going to happen. So you want to keep your options open so that you don't get into a situation to where you've kind of boxed yourself into a corner for really no reason at all. So we go on to the next one. Ramsey's perhaps best known for advocating a debt snowball method where people with multiple loans pay off the smallest balances first, regardless of interest rate. Now, the debt snowball is something that I really agree with from Dave Ramsey, even though people will always argue that, well, if you go by the math and you do the interest rate thing, you're paying more in interest and it's really just a math problem. And actually in this article, there's a finance professor who basically says that type of thing of, I think the jury's still out on if the, paying the smallest balance first actually helps. And here's my opinion on this. For the vast majority of people, optimizing for emotion is much better than optimizing for math. And even though it sounds counterintuitive, the reality is that we're humans, right? We're emotional beings. And the biggest obstacle for people being successful with money is not math. It's not because they don't know enough math. It's because they're unable to handle their emotions or have the discipline or understanding of how to handle their emotions. And that's what gets them off track. And so the beauty of Dave's approach with the debt snowball is it attempts to handle that specific problem very well. Your smallest balance gets paid off. All of a sudden, you're paying off multiple balances and it feels good. You're seeing the benefit. It's tangible and it keeps you motivated. It keeps you going. And I think when you take that idea to investing, the same can be true. Like I had a video about, ignore millionaire status, do this instead. What the whole idea was, look, if you're just getting started with investing and you don't really see the benefit, just pick one bill and buy enough dividend stocks to be able to pay off that bill every month, right? And it's a simple example. It's very crude. It's not optimized at all. It doesn't talk about, broad long-term strategy of total return. It's just to get you started to say, I see the benefit of investing now because this company is paying me and they paid my bill, this month. Okay, so let's get to the last one here. It says, Ramsey's advice has helped a lot of people reduce their spending, but it's his all or nothing approach that doesn't work for them. And these people have taken what they're calling an anti-Ramsey stance on TikTok. So let me start with this anti-Ramsey stance on TikTok comment. This is also one of the challenges that I think we have these days is, all of the people in this article who are critical of Dave Ramsey are all people who have their own TikTok accounts that have gotten hundreds of thousands of views by criticizing Dave Ramsey. And so, for us as viewers or consumers, we always have to be cognizant of the fact that someone may just be making a video because they're trying to get views. And they may not even believe the things that they're saying. And they may just be criticizing Dave Ramsey because it's popular to criticize Dave Ramsey because he's popular. Any piece of information that we get online, we really need to focus on how we apply it to our own personal situation and not just take it blindly. Because quite frankly, the things that people are saying, they may not even believe or they may not even be doing. They're just doing it for views. Okay. So let's go back to this part about Ramsey's advice has helped a lot of people reduce their spending, but it's his all or nothing approach that doesn't work for them. And I really think this is an example of how sometimes these days we allow things that don't matter to prevent us from learning things that do matter. And it's this idea that we need to agree 100% with everything that a person talks about for us to like them or to learn from them. And how I look at this is like every manager that I ever had in my career. Like if you've had a job, especially a corporate job, you've probably had really good managers, you maybe had some bad managers, and hopefully you've had an experience of like a great manager. But what I learned is that I could take pieces of every single manager that I had, and they all kind of helped me become, ultimately who I was going to be as a manager. I had one where every time I had performance review, they would ask me for my accomplishments. I would email them to them. And then when I got my performance review back, it was literally what I sent them, word for word, no changes, no added comments or nothing. And I remember how that made me feel was, man, one, they don't really know what I do. And two, they didn't spend any time on my review, and it's my career, right? And at the end of the day, regardless of how much we like our job or our work or our manager or our teammates, people only show up to work because you pay them, right? It's just the reality of life. So people really care about their own career. And when you have managers that don't prioritize that, it sucks. So when I became a manager, one of the things that I would do is I would keep track of all my people's work. And, when it came time for performance reviews, I would literally write their whole performance review without any input from them first, right? And then I would give them a chance to review it, make sure I didn't miss anything or mess anything up. And it was something that I learned from one of the worst managers I ever had because I just didn't want to be how they were. So the point of that very long story is that we shouldn't limit ourselves to only learning from people that we agree with 100%, because the reality is that there's probably no one on this earth that you agree with 100%. So when I see this type of comment of, his all or nothing approach doesn't work for me. Okay, cool. But if he's helping you reduce your debt, that's extremely valuable. So take that piece. And then, maybe the other parts of your investing or personal finance journey isn't about Dave Ramsey. Maybe it's about someone else, or maybe it's some mix of things that you learned from other people. So those are just my thoughts on it. Let me know if you guys like this video. A little different style, a little different topic, but I did think it was interesting because we deal with these type of things every single day when we're trying to learn about investing or personal finance or really anything. Now, if you guys want to hear more of my thoughts on different investing styles and me answering viewer questions, click on this video right here. Hope you guys have a great day out there. Financial independence is true freedom. So keep building and stacking wins. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.